Nor, come meet Eunice.
Oh my goodness. Okay. We seem to be live streaming.
We're live streaming right now.
I'm so sorry, but there may be some things a little bit techie, and there are always things a little delayed. This is Matt Meyer, Secretary General of IPRA. I'm so excited to tell you that in a few minutes, there will be right here on this channel at this moment, the plenary organized by and spoken by our youth activists, our organizers. And stay tuned. You'll see their faces in a few minutes. You'll hear them chattering as well, but the official presentation will begin just in a few minutes. Welcome to the 29th Biannual International Peace Research Association Conference. This is the plenary for May 18th, 3:30 Eastern Time, Youth Activists for Peace and Justice.
So that they can hear you. Hi. Yeah, he's still tuned in the box, so it's gonna sound staticky, but I wanted to turn and show. This is. I'll let them introduce themselves. He's gonna fix it. He's fixing it. Put yourself on mute for a second. Sorry, they're gonna introduce themselves, but the noise is. Yeah. This is Sifan, Noor, and Michael. Okay, yeah. We're happy to see you. They can't hear you just at this second.
Everything is in order.
Now it's in order? Okay. Say hello. Testing. Say something. Hello. Can you hear me? Can you say something again? Sorry. Can you say something again?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Try saying your name. I just adjusted the audio.
Monica, my phone internet went off, so I'm going to join on the computer now. So hi everybody.
Hey, they're not all here yet, but they're gonna be here. We were just trying to get a success. Let me get the camera on you. Let's see if I can. Who can I? Okay, it's supposed to be on the speaker, but how do I? Oh, okay. So, are you using both the laptop and the computer at the same time right now? Like in terms of.
Yes.
So put the other one on mute for a second.
Alright.
And now you should be the one speaking, right? Speak. Go ahead. Okay, now it's on you. It's like set on speaker mode, but if I do gallery, it won't go. How are you doing, by the way? I know it's really late there.
How are you? It's late. It's chilling in here. I'm so sad I couldn't make it to Canada.
But you're here in spirit. You're on Zoom.
That's right. This is the exciting behind-the-scenes pre-plenary conversation between the speakers, and one of them off-screen is zooming in from Ghana.
Well, she's in Ethiopia right now.
I'm sorry, she's Ghanaian, zooming in from Ethiopia right now.
Okay,
There
now
it is.
everything is good, right?
Yes, everything is good.
Remember, if
I
you
want
are
to share the live stream. Yeah.
coming in from outside, you know.
Do I like from here? Yeah.
You in charge of the audio.
Okay, I got it. And you don't think it's too loud right
So
now?
I fixed it already. So it's no matter, just balance it.
Okay, thank you so
You
much.
start to speak, then you know, right?
Thank you so much. Are you nervous?
I think I'm good.
You'd be the only one because there was less.
Where are the rest? I saw them beside you.
Yeah, do you want to go first or do you want to go first? Do you want to
No, you guys should go first.
Oh, they should go first. Okay, just so you can, yeah, that makes sense.
That's good.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
I was wondering, that's my question.
Also,
If
you
they
have
have
to
to
say
say
it. You guys want to sit? Yes. I don't want to feel like standing. But I think it's I know the people in the back will us. Does it as well? Well, it hasn't. I think we should probably wait because people might swing.
No, some of them are just not even.
Yeah, some stuff about it. So I think we should probably wait. Yeah, and then like I had a lot of these. I think it should be a full room. At least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
It's almost a weird for me for like setup.
Right. It used to be that you couldn't put in a link if you didn't have a certain amount of followers.
Wait, for what?
Yeah, for Instagram.
Instagram? Are you live streaming?
No, I'm just putting
Oh,
putting
I
the
was
live
like-
stream link on my story in case anyone wants it.
Oh my goodness, it's a live. Oh wait, let me tell my dad right now.
Yeah.
I sent it in the group chat.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
Vlog.
Yeah. Yes.
When you start, especially when you speak with, I would like the laptop a little bit away.
A little more to the side. Yeah.
Just, you'll see how you
Yeah.
look right here.
Yes.
And we are live. I can't just stop the live stream. But you may want to wait a little bit, not too long.
Yeah, we're gonna wait a couple more
As
minutes.
you were.
People want to flow in.
Alright guys, photograph.
Are we getting a photo?
So I can put this so you can see it on there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
It's gonna be a 0.5.
that's what it is to be.
Alright, ready?
Okay. You're sending that to me.
Did it work?
Yes. You're send it now. And then you should put the link like with it. Like,
That's what
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Okay. You know, I'm kind of okay if it's a small group. I think we can have some forward because I feel like it's weird to go spread out. Oh, see, now people are wanting to again.
No one likes to sit next to you.
I'm
I'm saying, since you have all these seats.
People will be still flowing in. Do you think we should start in like a minute or two? Or should we wait like 5 more minutes?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, but it shouldn't be more longer than 5 minutes. I think.
Longer than 5 minutes?
You shouldn't wait more than 5 minutes.
More than 5 minutes. Okay. Let's start at 5 minutes. It doesn't, if people are walking in, that's late. You're gonna sit right there.
Sit there, but I'll come.
Instagram, everyone. I'm nervous.
You're fine. You guys are going to be great. It's a given. You're great.
I kind of wish we were here, but
It's going to come in. I was worried 5 minutes ago, but this is right.
you guys ready? Oh, 1 second.
Quick,
We're gonna start
social
in like
media
really soon.
announcement.
Okay, whenever don't be nervous. Okay.
Eunice, you have an Instagram.
I'm here.
Do you have an Instagram?
Yes, I do. I've been posting about IPRA.
Okay, send it in the drop it in the chat really quick.
We're announcing the
Oh,
plenary.
and I'm gonna hide the chat. I'll close the chat out in a second.
Okay.
Where's my account? Okay, my account's private. It's not I'm gonna do. Post it, like, go ahead and post it, and then we can do it later.
Wait, did you get yours?
Okay, yeah. Brush UPGH. I'm gonna hide the chat. The chat is hidden out. So no one can see your personal information in our conversation. Alright.
Okay. Shared.
Period. Fair enough.
Are we ready now? Yes, for a second. You have to put your phone on silent unless you're using it for like. Yeah, period. Okay. Is the mic already?
Hello. 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 Okay.
I'm the first to begin. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Hoping people will trickle in. But if you don't already know me, my name's Monica Solis. I'm the administrative coordinator for the conference. I'm also a sophomore at Gettysburg College. We wanted to start off by saying thank you to IPRA. Lower. Okay, got it. Thank you. Even lower? It's a small room. I can probably talk loud. Isn't it because of the laptop? Yeah. Let's try that. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. So we wanted to say thank you so much to the conference for hosting the space for this plenary that we think is really important. I remember I started working on this and it was really Dr. Williams and Matt and the other planning committee people who came up with this idea to host the space. But I remember being ecstatic when they offered to me to organize it. And I was like scrambling to find candidates and who I think would be great people. And I'm very happy that I hope that you all will enjoy these other people who are joining us today. Because I know I'm very excited to hear what they have to say. And the few days that I've been here and getting to know them have been wonderful so far. We have a very bright future for this field. So yeah, I'm going to start with introductions now. They can introduce themselves. Thank you again.
Good day, everyone. My name is Sophie Allen. I'm from Guyana. I'm a child's rights ambassador. I'm also an environmental activist, and my main focus throughout these few years that I've really delved into activism is environmental education. I believe that people need to understand their true rights and the right to a healthy environment and how it does lead to justice and peace for all.
Hi, I'm Noor El Ghazali. I am a student at the George Washington University, a POSSE scholar, and also the Consortium of North American Peace Project's Transformative Leaders in Peace and Justice inaugural fellow. My main focus, I'm Egyptian American, and as an Egyptian, I noticed a lot of our cultural heritage in museums in the Western world, and it spurred a lot of questions about the ethics of museum collection and ownership, and so my research mainly focuses on the emergence of archaeology, museology, and Egyptology to support the machine of colonialism, and how we can imagine museums as a more interactive and community-centered tool for storytelling.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael, also known as Matt's son. My research is primarily focused around contemporary American history, specifically through the lens of electoral politics. I have been looking into the way that political apathy affects young people and the future that will have for the American political system.
Eunice, it's time for your introduction.
I just want to know we're having some technical issues.
Hi.
There we go.
Hi, everybody. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, all of you. All protocols observed. My name is Eunice Kisiwajan. I'm from Ghana. I'm originally from Ghana, but now I'm in Addis. Yes, I work on youth, peace, and security. I work with the Youth Bridge Foundation. It's a youth-focused organization, and we work on how to bring peace in Africa. I mean, Ghana and Africa at large. So I work on youth, peace, and security, just as I said earlier on. I studied politics undergrad, and I did my master's in international affairs and diplomacy. In international affairs and diplomacy, I did my thesis on the emerging trends of conflict in West Africa, where I spoke about the new trends of conflict in the continent and how we will be able to resolve it, or how we can build a resilient early system to resolve those conflicts. So it's a pleasure to have all of you here with me, even though I am very spirit. I really wish I was there with you, but unfortunately, I'm not here, but it's a privilege to talk to all of you. Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to start and make this kind of interactive and have lots of questions. We want this to be a dialogue because we don't think it really needs to be, we're trying to break hierarchies here, aren't we? So we want to start with, what do you think really inspired you in the first place to get involved in what you're doing? And I think for me, I've always been raised in kind of service and service to other people, and that can take shape in a lot of different ways. And always being around people who were service-minded, whether it was volunteering in a soup kitchen or admiring my mother, who was a public school teacher. There's lots of ways that we can get involved, and that's kind of what I mean to seek opportunities to be involved in work that helps people. And that's kind of an inspiration for me, but I'd love to hear more.
So for me, I come from a country with rich rainforests, interior savannas, wonderful waterfalls, and so on. So it wasn't hard for me to gain a love for the environment. And the main threat to the environment is us. And I realized that the country, which also has a rich culture, especially with indigenous persons, we need an activist. We need somebody who's going to be there to say, well, this is wrong and these persons are already marginalized. Let's not have them face the consequences of actions from persons who don't belong to that area or from corporations that don't even belong to that country. They have rights just as you and I have rights, and I realized that if you stay silent, you're basically aiding the problem. So for me, I decided not to be silent on issues that I know are wrong, especially when it comes to the environment and environmental protection.
For me, I wish I could say it was more of an intentional choice on my part, but I think I've kind of stumbled into just about everything I do. When I was growing up, as I shared, just seeing the way that cultural heritage and specifically like Oriental ethnologies are presented in museums never sat right with me, but I couldn't understand why. I was raised as an American, and I was also raised to appreciate museums as like the centers and progenies of culture and education. And when I was around 16, I got my first job at the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. And I was working in the education department, and the disparities in terms of labor, in terms of education, in terms of access were rampant, and no one seemed to really want to edify that within the higher ranks of the museum. And I realized they don't want to, because to fix the museum would be contingent on ending museums. And I was just really blessed and fortunate to have paths to explore that interest, and here I am today.
Okay, so for me, being politically active was never really a choice. Both of my parents are extremely politically active. I believe the first conference I went to was at War Sisters International when I was 2 in Dublin. But more specifically, in terms of my research regarding American electoral politics, the real impetus for that was the 2016 election, which happened when I was in high school. And one of the things that I found really fascinating about that was the way that young people had such strong opinions and really cared about it. And I obviously was too young to vote at that point, so were my peers. But one of the things that I really wanted to look at was how that increased attention and engagement among young folks would translate into the potential for increased engagement or not going forward.
Monica, it's my turn, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, so my inspiration to work on peace and security is very simple. Growing up, there was an election in my country, somewhere I think 2012. I was very little, but I was little all over the place. I used to speak whatever was in my mind, those kids. So we had an election in Ghana, and there was a small district in my district. I come from a village like 10 hours away from the capital. So I was there with my mother, and that small district is called Tyne District. We were able to hold the whole country's elections. So they had to bring a lot of military men and policemen to come and resolve the issue because the people were, obviously becoming what they had to do at that point in time. So I saw a lot of people running around their lives. Like when I saw that, I really was like, what can actually happen when I stand in front of a militiaman? What can actually happen when I stand in front of a policeman? Okay, why is it that people we have genuinely relinquished power to protect us and we are running away from them? That's wondering on my mind. I'm not a movie person, but I chanced on this movie called The Rise and Fall of Idi Amin. That movie broke my heart. I realized that if there is any chance I can build my potential to create a world where people will not be afraid to live, afraid to go around and do their daily things, the world that I should be able to create. So it's led me to having all these ideas. It led me to doing my project on peace and security from undergrad till now, and it is still I genuinely enjoy because I think all have peace at least. Have life, we should have peace to live in that life. That is my inspiration.
So we talked about, we all shared like our inspiration, and something that's come up is in my mind is thinking, there are real challenges though. We all had to have opportunities to get here, whatever that looked like. And I think, now we start to see that there are a lot of young people who are starting to become more skeptical of whether it's academia as an institution, of institutions in general. And so how do we get youth involved in this kind of work? What were some of the things, the opportunities that you were provided and the people that made it happen, And what are some of the challenges that we, particularly as youth and from various backgrounds and all over the world, face with becoming involved in this kind of work?
Yes, there's always challenges, but everything can be overcome. I always say sometimes setbacks are set up for something great. And many times in Guyana, when it comes to youth, there's oftentimes a disconnect between youth and your rights. It's oftentimes not taught you what are your rights as a youth, as an indigenous youth, as a youth on the coastline. What are you supposed to do and what is supposed to be given to you? And many times I find that education on the rights of youth needs to be done. Because once they're able to know their rights, they can fight for it. That justice can be served. Ignorance does not help. So we need to approach a situation. Oftentimes, it is nice to have a youth speaking to them so they understand that it's a familiar face, it's someone I can actually relate to. And I find in my work, especially with my organization, the Rights of a Child's Commission, I also work with the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. One deals with the rights and one deals with environmental capacity building and so on. We find that education and capacity building through workshops or fun activities actually help to reach the youth and actually gain relationship. Once we have relationship with persons already marginalized and they have honesty and have trust with you, you can then move them to a place where they can actually fight for their rights because they know them.
As an artist myself, I have been truly propelled and compelled in my life by the power of art. And a huge portion of my exploration came from being put into a teacher position before I really even knew what I was talking about, honestly. I was an art teacher for middle schoolers at a museum, and I would take them on tours and facilitate their connection with art, and just seeing the lack of attention that we have to our connection with expression, to our connection with these viscerally imbued feelings into like materiality. It's not something that we facilitate or encourage a lot of. So just being able to see the power of that on young people made me explore how else I can translate this into my life and take it throughout the world. And also living in Atlanta, I had access and was blessed to be surrounded by a community that has a long history of Black radical organization and liberation groups. So a lot of my praxis comes from working with my community, and it's the biggest inspiration of all, honestly.
So like I said, I grew up surrounded by academics, so the idea of doing something related to academia has always felt very natural to me. But one of the bigger challenges that I encountered when I started doing research was, I feel like, a sort of sense of hierarchy in academia, especially when talking about things like electoral politics, where I started too young to vote, or definitely haven't been able to vote once now, where I felt discouraged by people who were older, sort of telling me that I should, take a more backseat role for now, gain some more experience, learn some more, and that in 10 or 20 years, when I'm a little bit older and a little bit more accredited, then this sort of research is, then that's the time to pursue research. And I think that is a challenge that a lot of young people sort of across academia face, is this sort of pushback against age and a lack of experience. And part of the reason that I wanted to pursue my research and focus it on youth engagement is because I think that that's a very naive attitude, in the sense that young people will inherit the world, and that while we're inexperienced, we don't necessarily know how to do things perfectly. I believe that we need to start trying and learning now, so that by the time we're in positions of power, we have the experience to lead properly.
Hi, Monica. So I'll talk about general problems youth face before I talk about something a personal one. I personally do not really get intimidated. I have a supportive family and loved ones, so I really do not get intimidated by anybody. I think my only flaw is I do not love to be a sophist. So if I do not have the requisite knowledge on a particular thing I'm supposed to talk about, it becomes very difficult. So knowledge is one thing that actually limits me. So that's my own personal thing. If I study more, I am able to do exploits. I hope I'm making sense. For the youth, I will first talk about mentorship, because in our field of work, you need experience to thrive. We do not have the people we look up to, and we do not have a connection with them to work or to study under them. So it becomes difficult. It's like we are being mentored from afar. Does that make sense? So most people do not have, I don't know how it works in the US or in Trinidad or something, but here in Africa, most of the people look up to a lot of big people. It could be someone you've seen on TV. You do not have the relationship with them, and it becomes very difficult for people to mentor you from that portion. Also, I think the problem we face as youth here is the difference between the educational system and the job market. So it's a very serious issue over here. Youth face that so much because our educational system has a rigorous pattern where we follow by hook or crook, and the job market is pretty different. So a midway to actually curb that particular problem is through internships. But most people do not like to have interns too, because Africa, everything is about money. Let's be real over here. Everything is about money. If you're taking an internship program, or if there is an intern, you will have to give them something at least. So mainly it's about that we have a different pattern, and then we have a different job pattern, and we have a different educational system pattern. So it becomes very, very difficult. And the last thing I'll talk about is the youth underrepresentation, and it's because of apathy. We are not interested in the system. And that can equally be solved through capacity building. If we build our capacity to harness the good in the youth, I think we'll be able to do more and more as people. I love to bring the problem and ask solution, because I don't like to just leave the problem for any adult person to come and solve for me as a youth person. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think a big part of this that we've mentioned is education, and how do we create education, whatever that means, whether it's through training, internships, through an academic institution. The centrality of having an education that is truly engaging and is truly, breaking down barriers, breaking down paradigms, changing the narrative to where anyone can come from a place and provide education, but it's what we do with that. And you have to, I'm looking for the right words, but when I think of like how I got here and the relationship I have with Professor Dr. Williams, who is a mentor of mine, and I'm sitting on meetings and I'm here at the IPRA conference and people are seeing and treating me as almost an equal, right? And what does that mean? Because you don't have that in a lot of spaces. There's still this idea of, well, you're a young person, what do you know? And of course, we all have places to learn, but we're all constantly changing, we're all constantly learning and growing. And that's something that I think that a lot of people in various professions, but especially coming from the academic side, and even people who are in higher level organizations, they kind of build these barriers to allowing fresh, they call fresh blood, they, put barriers in the way to allow new ideas and new thinking that can contribute something positive. The thoughts?
Just pass it out. Don't be shy.
So education has always been something that has been my focal point, because I find that Guyana has about 45% of the population are youths. So this group needs a leader. They need persons who look like them, who are around their age, to guide them. Because oftentimes, if an older person comes, like, "Oh, you're trying to tell me how to live my life? You already lived your life." And I through a grant, it was the UNICEF and on the Rights of the Child's Commission, they had a grant which allowed me to actually create a talk show. So I have a talk show called Eco Space GY Talk Show, which I showcase young Guyanese who are doing brilliant things throughout the country and to inspire. And for that particular proposal, what I did, I focused it on social media. I said, I'm not going to put this on TV. Nobody watches TV anymore. I'm going to put this on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. They can't escape me. So I visited all 4 major social media platforms. I also, through my university, have a radio program. So if I don't catch them while they're on the phone, when they're driving, because they're not supposed to use their phone and drive, I get them when they're driving. So I really came to a point where I said, I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing something targeting youths. I'm seeing a lot of things that target youths to waste time. And I said to myself, you must be the change you want to see. So, and the grant actually is named Climate Change Makers. So I saw it, I saw the opportunity, and from there I'm able to actually partake in the education of the youths of my country.
She's amazing, right? In terms of just like the decentering and like hierarchy breaking down of education, it's inevitable in my opinion. There's more knowledge out there and accessible knowledge out there than there ever has been before. People don't care about getting a degree anymore, because why would I pay $60,000 when I could just go watch this talk show while I'm driving and I know everything I need to know. And I think that is like a format that has really been pushed to us by social media. And although like social media, it's a double-edged sword, there are many evils that come with it, it's also encouraged us to think bigger and think in different ways. And one thing that I work on within my school is like these guerrilla art history lessons. And just like public interventions where you learn something about our history and in our world and our politics that you wouldn't necessarily know in school. And personally, I've struggled within my own art history classes in the university where they're not teaching it the way that I think that they should be teaching it. So I decided, why not just do it myself? So at the end of the day, no one is stopping you but you. Just do it.
One of the things that I have been very lucky to experience in my life, starting from when I was quite young, maybe only second or third grade, is having educators who really enjoyed the idea of youth-led and student-led education. Not all of them, but some. It started out, in elementary school, just with maybe being a fourth or fifth grader, reading some books to the kindergartners or stuff like that. And as I moved up through the grades, I had some teachers who would allow students to prepare lessons, prepare PowerPoints and stuff like that, especially if it was an area of expertise for the students. Became a little bit better in college with some professors who would allow students to share their research or whatever it is that they're working on and they feel passionate about with the class, especially if it's relevant to the subject matter. And I think that, like Laura was saying, with the creation of social media, information is much, much more accessible. And so I think because of that, students now are more capable than ever of creating real lessons and being able to teach people.
Eunice?
Monica?
Yes.
I think what I would say about education, Ricky said most of it. With me, I will put two meanings into this. Let's take education and let's take knowledge. It is imperative we are knowledgeable about what we are doing as youth, just to add up to the education we are having. So let's just make sure as youth, whatever we are pushing to get in life, get the knowledge about it, add it to the education you are having. A lot of us have good teachers. I had a very good teacher from undergrad or lecturer from undergrad too. And I've worked with Dr. Hakeem William for a couple of months, and I can say for a fact, he's knowledgeable in what he does, and he's educated in it. It makes it easier for him to move in different angles. And I think that's what we should learn as we grow in the system. We should have the knowledge, we should do our research very well, because just as I said, what I hate in life is to be a sophist, to see something I do not have the whole frame about, and I'm saying is somewhat true. No, I'd rather not. So let's have knowledge on whatever we are doing, and let's add the education. Regardless of the education system you have in the country, I already talked about my country, that the educational system does not fit the job market. So that there's a break somewhere. So most of the people try to bridge these gaps. They are all working together to bridge the gap between the educational system and the job market. So, as I said, you should have knowledge to add up to the education you have, so that you can be a whole as it is. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was really well explained, the difference between knowledge and education. Anyone want to follow up on that, actually? Yeah.
The way that knowledge production and power works together, and knowledge consolidation works together, is the beating heart of the university system. Things are paywalled all the time because it benefits them and proliferates their existence by keeping these things inaccessible. And I know that I actually recently spoke on a panel at my university about the declining rates of humanities enrollment and why people are disengaged with humanities. And I feel like a lot of the blame is being shifted to young people in terms of this divestment from education and like what would be valued in that system. And the answer is that we're just no longer abetting our own exploitation. That's the end of the story. It's no longer necessary to participate in these systems which harm us, because we have the vision and the imagination to create something entirely new. And because of foundations like IPRA and all of the other wonderful organizations that we've been affiliated and mentored by, it's not only do we have the imagination, but now we have the faculty to do it. We have the tools to do it as well.
And I just came from a wonderful workshop today with Antonina Ochocontes, and she brought up a statistic that was very shocking to me about youth alienation and suffering, mental emotional suffering, and that it's at some of the highest rates it's ever been. And part of that is related to the world that we live in. And a lot of people seem to think of a glamorous childhood that maybe some generations did have. There's always been troubles in the world, we all know. But it seems, especially even now, like we mentioned on social media, that everyone is connected. That is one of the costs too, that we're constantly exposed and inundated with things that can burden us, all of us as activists, as organizers, as academics. And youth experience that too. And I think that definitely at our age is having an effect on people who are feeling apathetic and burnt out way sooner than they need to be. And really shouldn't be for anyone. But, what are things that, I guess the question is, I don't know if we know the answer to this, but what are things that we can do to combat that, to keep youth energized, engaged? And I think part of it is, the field is addressing some of these other issues like youth violence and things that youth specifically are exposed to. But we also need youth themselves to talk about youth problems. That's so important, and I think that's why we're here, because we have academics like older generations studying youth, and then youth who study other things. But youth should be studying ourselves too, and sharing with each other and having these conversations.
It has been known, there was this documentary, The Social Dilemma, on Netflix that spoke about the rise in suicides and mental health illnesses, depression in youth due to social media. And I always tell my friends that you have to realize that sometimes you need to disconnect. You need to sit down, disconnect, and then connect with the environment around you. Even if it's simply going out and speaking to your family members, you probably haven't seen them because you've been on TikTok for 2 hours. Or we know, and at the workshop I just attended, it's been scientifically proven that nature helps you relax. Nature helps you to ease anxiety, ease depression. So as someone who is educated in environmental studies, but I know that when I'm in nature, it's very hard to be angry when you see birds, the clean air. You see the beauty of the world. And I always encourage my friends, do things that are purposeful and try to always find ways to cope. Do not stay in the same situation that is causing you to have depression, that is causing you to have anxiety. If you're scrolling through Instagram and seeing persons on vacation, it's causing you to feel jealous of them, just click the phone off, read, and be grateful for what you have. Look around, see what you have, because oftentimes we see it every day and we become complacent. But everything is a gift. And the pandemic showed us that going outside should not be taken for granted. So,
yeah, I think the difficult thing about social media and this kind of aggregation of information that we have and the immediacy of it all is that it's completely collapsed our sense of time and space. And everything is happening to us much faster than it actually is. And for that reason, I mean, it's kind of a blessing and a curse, because for that reason, we're able to feel that much more empowered and that much more educated in such a short amount of time. But we're aging ourselves. I have friends who literally have ulcers and gray hairs because of the stress of the world around them and the compounding factors that just put you in this time warp. And on top of that, it's not as easy as just turning off the phone, right? Where it's psychologically Pavlov does. And there are very insidious and deliberate mechanisms in place to capitalize off of our time and make sure that we spend the maximum amount of time as we can away and disengaged from the world around us. And it's a very hard thing to be up against. But like you said, you really just have to
power.
Exactly, and you have to have this kind of support system as well. You're only going to be alienated over and over again when you're not in contact with other people who are doing things that you're doing and enabling you to do them as well, because virtual reality is not the only reality that there is.
I definitely think that the creation of social media and the easier access to information has been largely a good thing. But I think that one of the more challenging aspects that come out of it is how much easier it is to disseminate information for anyone to disseminate information, and the proliferation of false information that has led to. One of the things that I've encountered in my research is when I'm delving into why people do or don't support the candidates or policies that they don't, a lot of them are very, very misinformed. They'll say, I don't support this candidate because he did X, Y, Z, but it's just not true. That never happened. Or they'll say, I don't support this policy because it's going to do, whatever, destroy my home, raise my taxes, whatever it may be. But that's just not true. And I think that one of the things that is really important in terms of dealing with that sort of issue is, I guess, disengaging from social media and such like that, and creating sort of fact-checking systems, but ones that are less dominated by traditional hierarchies than universities and such like that, because I think that those are sort of the primary sources of reliable information, but the hierarchical nature of them really excludes young folks.
Can I add something? Just from what you said
She
as
can
well.
add it before I come inside. She can add it.
Wait, you're gonna,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. Just from my museum studies, everything around us is a curation. And that's essentially what social media is, right? It's curation, but it's done by algorithm. And when you get to the sense of what curation is and the history of why it came to exist, when did we stop appreciating and start curating and owning? So it's also the capitalist system that we have to disengage with as well, which I think is the great connector between all of our issues. So yeah, that was just something like that.
Go ahead. Okay. All right. So they have already, my colleagues on the panel already said a lot, and I'm not going to add more. I think they have said enough. One of my colleagues spoke about the mental health. I think we shouldn't play with it at all, because we need that to survive. Like, we need to be seen enough so that we will be able to survive. I'll talk about 3 points I wrote down just when it started happening to me. So when I wrote down, let's create a platform for dialogue. I think we should have this sense of saying something when we are not okay. It is okay not to be okay. So just create that platform to talk to someone, have conversations with people you resonate with a lot. Do not just have conversations, just have good conversations with people you know for sure. You are comfortable sharing with them, and you know your information is safe with them. So as youth, let's have that particular cohort. It's going to help all of us. Also, we should have an online community. A lot of us talked about social media. I mean, from all the reports, WHO reports, African Union reports, it is inevitable that the world is moving into a digital system, and there are people that social media love, or social media attention has really helped them move from one place to the other more than anybody else. So please, let's create that platform. People who want to talk about youth in the Caribbean, let's have that platform. Let's be more educated in that context. Let's just put whatever we want to say from our minds over there. And lastly, I'll talk about youth engagement in arts and sports. Let's not play with music, art, and sports. It is very important because these particular things foster understanding, it fosters empathy, and it's a sense of sharing humanity. If we have the same team, I know you are my brother, we all support Arsenal, and at a point, we will all be happy. At that particular point, if that's the happiness you are going to give at that particular, please go for it. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. We do need a wide range of opportunities. In this room, we've talked so much about organizing and like it's particularly activist organizing and academic research. But there are things that youth are doing in their communities every day. I go on, and once again, to reference social media, one of the reasons that I have TikTok is because of all of the work that I see people doing there and connecting and building they're building these virtual communities and safe spaces. And, I was doing a paper this past semester on autonomism, particularly with the Zapatistas and talking about, transformation of transnational solidarity networks. And I'm thinking now, like we have this new virtual space that is also taking shape, and people are connecting in ways that defy traditional institutions and hierarchies, and are building community, international communities, which, this conference is an international community of its own, but building international communities in this particular virtual space that is so important because we are moving into a digital world. And we do need to still have that human connection. And as youth, I feel like are pushing the way forward in that sense. And it's great to have more opportunities because I think youth are going to be the ones that help everyone else transition to this new future in a way that is positive, that is productive, that is helpful, that is still addressing, our other human needs. And that's kind of how I look at it. I see it as something very positive.
Yes, it can be said, arguably, that the environmental movement has been taken over by the youth. Greta Thunberg, a simple protest in Sweden in front of our parliament, started the climate strikes that raved over the world. Even Guyana had its own climate walk, and when I attended in 2019 the inaugural Youth Climate Action Summit, where she spoke, when she said that you have filled with false promises of prosperity and so on. It really showed me that social media can start movements that change the world. And once used correctly, we as youths can begin to take the place that we rightfully are supposed to be given in the first place. And when it comes to the environment, youths particularly need to have a space to speak because we inherited. Next 20, 30 years, we will be the leaders. So should we not speak now to the injustices that are occurring right now so it can be stopped? So 30, 20 years, I'm not having the same conversation. And the youths of that time are arguing with me. So inaction is never good. And for me, we need to ensure that spaces are created and they're sustained. Because as I move out of what age limit would you say youths?
I'm timing out.
Let's say 35. I want to ensure that the opportunities I have, the youth in 20 years from now have that same opportunity and more. So it's important for us to ensure there are long-lasting solutions and there are spaces where these solutions can exist.
Yeah, absolutely. I also do think that there is a bit much of an emphasis on internationalism, which is a beautiful thing, but I think that cosmopolitanism has really blinded us from our own stories and our own nuances and distracted us from the important work that needs to be done within our communities first. I think locality is something that's being lost to this new century. And as someone who loves history and preserves history and thinks that the ephemeral nature of our own creation is representative of our entropic destiny. We're all going to die and we're all going to be born. Those are the two fundamental truths of life. And it's the same for youth movements, right? Sometimes they no longer serve us and that's okay to let them go. I think this constant grappling and egoism that's tied up with a lot of activism work gets in the way a lot. And so focus on your community, focus on your friends, focus on yourself. And generational trauma is something that we are encountering and facing and eradicating head on as in a way that I don't think has been done before, because we have these systems to support ourselves and understand the underlying mechanisms of why we act the way that we do. And I think it's a bright future ahead.
Unfortunately, my research isn't quite as positive as what the rest of them have said. There definitely are some silver linings. Voter turnout among people under the age of 35 in the United States is increasing. In our last congressional election, we recently elected the first Gen Z Congress member. But I think that looking at that sort of surface level stuff glosses over the realer issues. If you look on a policy by policy basis, the policies that have majority support in the United States, things like ending wars, increasing taxes on wealthy people, increasing climate regulations, are not being pushed by either party. And one of the other things I noticed was that, I forget the exact statistic, but it was something like of people who were planning to vote for Joe Biden below the age of 35, less than 25% of them considered themselves enthusiastic to do so. And so what this says to me is that the increased voter turnout among young people is probably a result of dealing with a very acute issue, being Trump and the rise of fascism in the United States. But I worry that without that motivating factor, there is a lot of underlying apathy and disengagement and feeling that neither party really represents the beliefs of young Americans.
I absolutely resonate with him, what he just said, but I will add something small. The First Lady spoke about social media. I thought I was going to talk about digital innovation, but I think they are doing my job, which is, bravo, I enjoyed that part. But I will just add 2 examples as we are deliberating over these issues. Let's not forget about the peace content in what we are talking, the security content in what we are talking about. So I will give only 2 examples on how we have been able, people here in Africa have been able to use an online platform to actually resolve something or to get an early warning to something. So after the Kenyan 2008 elections, there were a lot of electoral, disengagement in the system, and they created a platform called Ushahidi. It's in Swahili, which means testimony, which translates into if you see something, say something. And they had an online platform, they had a text message platform, they had an email platform where people were able to report incidents at that instance. And civil societies together with policymakers took these particular information is being shared via these platforms, and they were able to create an early warning platform to prevent the upcoming war. So it's like a pre-planned thing, but they were able to use this data to stop it. A recent one can be seen in Nigeria, where all the youths cramped up on Twitter just to hashtag end sadness. They all joined. I don't know who didn't join. I joined. I'm not Nigerian, but I joined. So these are some of the ways we can actually use to push whatever we want to talk about out there without necessarily choosing violence. Thank you.
And to comment on what Michael brought up, and then I know you had something to share too on that, Eunice. To bring up what Michael said about the disconnect between youth and institutions, whether it's voting, politics. If these are ideas, this is the future of the way things are going. Like, I think in my own personal studies as a student and the little organizing that I've done on campus and my community, one of the things that is so discouraging is when the burnout increases is that disconnect, is the fact that we are working really hard, but they're not the institutional avenues for our voices as youth to be heard and to be reflected in the larger scheme of things. And people who are much older have that privilege to be able to say, well, I'm an older person and through my years of experience, or I have the authority to do something about it. But I think so many people, unfortunately, as they get older, get caught up in the system. Whatever system that is, they get caught up and they get trapped and get pulled out of the system. And I think it's important to bring in youth into these spaces to remind us as we age of that. To remind us that we need to always be rooted in the work that we're actually trying to do, which is to change things, to change the system. And we can't do that if we get so caught up, so lost in the sauce, as some people say, that we forget that. And I hope that like if we have more spaces for youth like that, you know, as we get older and we continue that conversation, that will change. But I know that that's a huge barrier, and you know, what is the solution that, you know, we think, like, what are some of the things that we can think of, the changes that we want to see for that to happen?
You wanted to share? I'll let you go first.
Oh, yes, sure. But I missed you actually, so if you can take me through that one.
Yeah, I was just talking about, like, once again, like the disconnect that people felt they were having. And I had commented on Michael's earlier statements, and I know that you wanted to share something.
Yes, just as I said earlier on, there is already apathy. The youth is not necessarily interested in the system. Because, can I share personal experiences from where I'm coming from? Okay, so we have a system with less representative of the youth vote in parliament. That is already there. Secondly, most of the things that happen up there is being given to us as youth. So if I know I one way or the other, I'm going to go to the post to vote and there will be no change or no reflective impact on me as a youth, I'd rather not. So there is that apathy and youth not necessarily being interested in the system because of, a lot of issues. Because they are not getting what they voted for. The system do not reflect them. What else should I say? I don't want to say corruption because there's corruption in every country, so it may not necessarily be mine. Not all that bad, but there are some things that do not really happen and really good for the youth, because we feel, one thing I'll say is, we do not get exactly what we want, so the end goal is we will have to push for it. Because there is a break, we will have to push for it. We will have to push for, my organization, for instance, we have this particular program where we groom youth into political parties, or we groom youth for them to be in parliament so that they can go and represent the youth. Because we are saying we do not have the platform, we are saying we do not have the system to actually thrive. Now we are grooming them so that they can actually go and work. So we do not necessarily get what we voted for, and that's a problem.
Question is,
We're still talking about, or,
oh,
the question.
right.
All right. Well, I guess.
So, unless anyone else want to make a comment about Michael's point about the apathy and like challenges to combating it?
I was just going to respond to what you were saying after you spoke.
I'd like to ask a question. Okay, I'm going to ask the question again. So basically, I had brought up, what do we think potential solutions are in combating this disconnect, providing more avenues for youth to get the change that they need to see within the existing framework. And that's really challenging because we know that the existing framework doesn't serve everyone already, regardless of your age. But there are things that are being done. There's work that is being done. And what can we do? What role do we have in whatever we're doing here at this conference and outside of it? What can we do about it?
Yeah, I know that a lot of us were introduced to like the academic world, and the big buzzword was intersectionality, right? Which is, the idea that certain identity factors compound to create a very specific and more violent experience. But I think that what is more true to the reality is this idea of comorbidity or co-construction, where, race is only able to be performed through the idea of gender, which is only able to be performed through the idea of class. They're all different heads of the same beast. And I feel like that is really representative of a lot of activism work, is we're all attacking different heads of the same beast, but we're not getting to the heart of it. And I think that's a lot of miscommunication. And it's also a lot of us boxing ourselves in. We have our niches and we have our nuances and we stick to them. But, environmental degradation is happening because museums, contribute to carbon emissions and also the transportation of cultural heritage. And that extraction is contingent on environmental degradation, deforestation. And electoral politics are, the driving forces and mechanisms that empower these systems to do this. So we're all tackling the exact same thing, but we're just looking at different aspects. And I think that is the biggest barrier, is to be able to overcome these seemingly disparate realities and attack that heart of conflict.
You see, many governments already suffer from institutional fragmentation, where they have multiple agencies who have very overarching aims and goals, and it oftentimes gets lost, and sometimes projects that can be dealt with by 3 organizations who come together in cooperation are oftentimes left to one who might not have the manpower, who might not have the capacity. So we as youths must see the mistakes of those before us and avoid them, because if we are going to infiltrate the spaces that we want to be heard, it makes sense to have a collective voice. And when we are there, we are already speaking about not being taken seriously a lot of times. But we must be able to communicate our message in such a way that they understand the gravity of the situation. So if we are to say that we need to be heard first, what is the message you want to get across? How do we get it to the source that we can actually make the change? And when we do that, how do we ensure that we as youths are not even boxing a small group of youths in, or who are we looking to represent in this case? We are looking to represent youth. We are youth leaders. So we must be able to get messages and get ideas and get projects done in such a way that one group of youths does not feel left behind, right? Because that leads to the next problem. Though we might not be able to get everybody, we as youth leaders should recognize the strength in unity, right? Fragmentation never helps.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I think that one of the really important first steps is creating, I guess for lack of a better word, a less pretentious source of information that is verifiable and fact-checked. I think that one of the problems we have with that going on in the United States right now is that academia tends to be very elitist and exclusionary towards those that are not part of it, and tends to be predominantly liberal. And I think that leads to a situation where a lot of American conservatives just mistrust anything that comes out of a university or a legacy media outlet kind of off rip without even looking at the methodology of any of that. So I think that creating a source of information that is newer, less stuck up, less pretentious, and more willing to talk just facts is a good way to start.
Monica, they have said it all. I'll just add capacity building to it. The youth in the room should congratulate themselves. They are on the path to make this place. Actually, for you to come for this conference to build your capacity on peace and security is the first step to it. If you want to be heard, you should have a substantial information so we can hear what you want to say. You can't just say, I want to be heard. You are loud for nothing. And there's something we say about empty barrels. So do not be one. Now you are there, you are listening to the program, you are passing through the system, what they are going to say in the main events and this particular event, whatever they are going to do, are building a capacity to be the mouthpiece for the youth. Secondly, we can't undermine the importance of partnerships when it comes to going forward tutoring systems. Because mind you, regardless, youth is part of the marginalized group, unfortunately. Even here in Africa, we take 70+% of the continent, but we are still marginalized group. So please, the importance of partnerships cannot be overly emphasized. We will have to come together so that we see how collective we are and we can achieve a particular goal. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a little around 15 minutes left. At this point, we wanted to actually ask you guys if you had questions for us. And if you have thoughts that you just want to share, if you're a youth in the audience, we wanted to include you. Because we're on the plenary here, but everyone here is important. Everyone here matters. So if anyone is not feeling shy and has a question that they want to ask us or ask the room, then that'd be great. And you can introduce yourself if you want.
Hello everyone, my name is Simone. I am from Trinidad and Tobago. I live in Trinidad. So I just wanted to follow up on your last topic that you all spoke about. I made some notes. I'm 28, so I guess I fall into youth. I am a research assistant at the University of the West Indies. I'm in the civil engineering department working on nature-based solutions. I have a bachelor's in environmental biology and a master's in biodiversity conservation, so environmental studies, right? My work also focuses on youth. Right now, I am particularly interested in fostering collective action through mindfulness and joy. So just to follow up, the question that you asked, right, was what can you do to address the disconnect between youth, right? So I had some points. You all said a lot of what I was thinking, right? One of the things is young people understanding their rights and the roots of the problem. So I'm from a colonized place in the US, right? Many of us are. And what I've noticed in my advocacy is that, and even in the Caribbean, is that we tend to engage young people in a way that addresses the physical symptoms of the problems. So for example, reforesting mangroves and doing beach cleanups and so on, and not really tackling the roots, which is colonialism and capitalism. I mean, it sounds really large. Like, how are we supposed to tell children about this in schools? And I'm not gonna tell a child about colonialism. It's not gonna stick, right? But therein lies the question: how do we begin to have the conversation? How do we present it to young people? And I mean, this is more so a challenge that I'm posing to everyone who's here and interested. How do we in our work, young people or people who don't fall into the category of youth right now, how do we challenge ourselves to get people to think even intergenerationally, because that's very important, about the root causes and how to challenge that. The next point was intergenerational collaboration, to be open to it. I also had fostering curiosity and joy, which I think was mentioned. Right now, I am starting work on a project that is supposed to engage young people, high schoolers, in doing a baseline biodiversity study, but being involved in every aspect of it. So from the design to the execution to the stakeholder engagement, and these are teens doing it, and encouraging them to be curious, practicing science, but also understanding that there's also indigenous and traditional knowledge to be shared in the work. And the last thing I would say is to reject individualism. So, just for some context, I'm married. My husband, I was speaking to my husband yesterday, and we were having one of our usual conversations. What is life? We're on a spinning rock, can you remember where, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, one of the things that he's not an environmentalist, but he works in human rights. And one of the things I asked him was, you know, like, why is there not action? Why is there only talk? You know, why is it so hard to act? And I mean, I ask myself that, right? Because I'm in the field and sometimes I feel very overwhelmed that I don't know what to do. And the answer that we came up with was that we live, the system that we live in, it punishes collective action. It rewards individualism. And I mean, like, I can only speak for the Caribbean. Like, I can't say I can speak for the Caribbean region. We do what we are told, you know? We're told to adopt technologies and rules and laws, and we do such. And I've observed, you know, in the communications that the campaigns that are brought on to young people by regional organizations, they tell us things like, unplug your appliances, bike to work, all of that. I drive in my father's car. I don't have a car. You know, like, I mean, and public transport is not good, you know, and it really fosters, like, feeling like, it fosters an attitude of the responsibility being mine, not ours. And it also, it fosters an attitude that we cannot ask for accountability from the people who need to be held accountable, because I did not cause climate change. I didn't cause accelerated climate change. And as a matter of fact, my personal opinion is that climate change is not anthropogenic. It is, what is the word? It's a product of the Capitalocene. And you know, that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Capitalism, it's not people. If everybody was living it without capitalism and colonialism, I think I mean, climate change probably would have happened, but not so fast. But that's my opinion. Anybody feels like you want to talk to me about it after, I'll be here. But back to what I was saying, I think that we are struggling to release ourselves from individualism. And I think that understanding that as young people, and I must say I'm confident that we are on the way, I think that understanding that collective action and joy in that action is very important for the futures that we want to see for ourselves.
So much, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I have a lot of thoughts about that. Does anyone else want to share anything? You have a question? Okay, and then I'll ask you a question. Yes.
What lie that older people tell bothers you the most today?
That's a really good question. So I'm going to pass it to you first, because you wanted to say something really quick, and then I ask the question.
Yes, I do agree with what you said, that we need to approach it in such a way that we understand a collective approach is needed. And one project that showed me that we need a collective approach, and also showed me that youth need to also know their rights. As I shared earlier in the workshop we're part of, I'm part of a group called Caribbean Youth Environment Network, and we do regular cleanups on a beach in Guyana. And we noticed that every time we came to this beach, there was more and more garbage. So we realized that we need to speak to the persons. And being a youth organization, we targeted the youth. So we went to the schools, and we started off by making the presentation something that spoke to them. And we realized that it needs to be personal. When a group of persons understand how they're personally affected, they can now speak to each other and they say, you know what, we need to make change. So we said to them, do you know you have a right to clean water? Do you know you're supposed to have clean, sanitized drinking water coming out of your pipes? And they said, we do. I said, yes. But do you know plastic? can cause water to get dirty. Yes, and we brought them out, we showed them, look, there's a lot of plastic here. Do you not think that this is an issue that will affect you? And we told them about all of the health effects of plastic pollution. We told them of the environmental effects. And they were so surprised. And we need not to think that they know. Well, do not assume people know. When we assume, we oftentimes are wrong. And from that simple exercise, we recognize the need for a country-wide project that targeted youth for them to understand their environmental rights. And when we did our research, we realized that most adults learn about environmental rights, about climate change, sustainable development from who? Who do you think most adults learn it from? Youths. So once we target that group, we know they will tell their parents, Mommy, Daddy, do not throw garbage in the water. I have to drink that. It's my right to get clean water. So that is something we really saw. The collective approach that is needed doesn't stop at water quality. It goes to human rights. It goes to child rights. It goes to voter rights. Go ahead.
Yeah, all of that. It's all connected. And also, just quickly, we're born burnt out now. Right? We're exhausted. And there's this foundation back home in Atlanta called the NAP Ministry, which I love. It's framing napping and rest as radical resistance to colonialism and white supremacy. And I think that that's very important. We need rest in order to do the big things that we need to tackle. So to your lovely question and all the points herein, we need to rekindle our joy and rekindle our base calm.
Oh, I have the lie.
Okay, I want to answer really quick to the lie question. The biggest lie an adult ever told me: in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That right there is the biggest lie. Because obviously there are so many systems out there other than colonialism. But as someone who is born and raised in the United States, my father is from Costa Rica. My mother is from the United States, but comes from immigrant background, German, Irish. And, you know, what does that mean for me personally? Personally, I feel very connected to the issue of colonialism. Obviously, in my positionality, I'm a white passing person who benefits from that system, but it's sometimes, you know, there's the intersectionality aspect, and there are many layers to all of this. But you know, that would have been really important to not have glossed over. And I know that Simone mentioned earlier, how do we, you know, teach things like that to youth? And there are people out there who are finding ways to do that. They're finding ways that are age appropriate to discuss these issues of white privilege, of you know, healing from intergenerational trauma, and what that means for people at different ages. And that's amazing that we're starting to see that work, but we need more of it. So that's probably the biggest lie, because once I began the journey of unlearning the lies that come with that, you know, you start a journey of rediscovering self and rediscovering the whole of the world and society and what it means to be here right now in Trinidad at the crossroads of the Americas. I mean, it changes everything. So that's the answer I have for that question.
Oh, the lie was
So I guess I can't definitively prove it's a lie, but I'm pretty sure it's not true. And the statement that I've heard from a ton of older people is that myself and the rest of my generation are going to become more conservative as we get older.
Did you want to share?
Oh, yes. On the path of the changes in government, I would like to share something personal that happened in my country. I have the singular privilege to actually mention that one of the people who made that particular decision happen is on this platform with us, Dr. Christian Anderson. Thank you so much for joining. So it wasn't long ago, we had a program in organization, because previously we've had university students rioting and agitating against systems in Ghana, and we've had this kind of violent acts going on for years, with little to none, or with little to nothing being done about it. So we decided to host a program where we would bring the University Students Association of Ghana, which is USA, which Dr. Christian Anderson is their president. We decided to host all of them in a military camp setting so that they will listen to what some other people who have been to war and how they are reintegrating themselves into the system. Restorative justice, that's Dr. Hakim's stronghold. So Dr. Hakim actually gave the lecture, and later on we had a conversation with the security services and the student body, or the students who tend to fight these security services. And it was sad to hear most of these students talk about the fact that they do not trust the system, and they do not believe the security that these people are supposed to provide them, they are able to. And I had a fair share of that when I was in undergrad. There was a fight between two schools, two hostels like that in my school. And the moment the security services got there, they started beating the students up. So it has been going on for a long time. So I asked the one who represented the security services of Ghana, and I'm like, why does it happen that way? We give you all the power to take care of us, but in the moment we have any altercation with you, it tends to be you bullying and beating us. It was sad that the man went back home and had a Zoom meeting with almost 5,000 plus security service people, young people in the security service, and asked them why they are like, their system is like that. Why do they feel the need to choose violence when they can dialogue? It was there that they realized that the frustration they relinquish on people outside is because they are internally frustrated with their salaries, their system of work, their employment benefits and everything. And these people are people we are giving them the money to protect us. So this particular meeting we had went a long way to inform the security services, and they were able to sit down to plan that, oh, come to think of it, I mean, we are all people who know a little bit about peace and security, so we know the frustration aggression theory. The people are frustrated, leads to aggression, and later catastrophes. So the people in the securities were actually frustrated themselves. So when they meet civilians and you try not to reason with them, they can only accept force because they are mandated actually. So this small event we had just to understand the gap between the security service and the civilian action led to them understanding why they do what they do outside. So I think the change starts from both of us. The little change we can do at our small corner will go a long way to inform society. It may not be that's massive, but it's a change, and a way is a way.
Thank you for that. I've heard this over and over again. Money does not buy happiness. If it does not buy happiness, why do we continue to exploit natural resources at the rate we do? Why do we continue to fight the idea of sustainable development? Because we're trying to make as much economic earnings as possible. Then why do we put money in front of people, money in front of the environment? So if that is true, then it should be easy for governments to sustainably use resources. It should be easy for governments to put legislations for climate mitigation, climate adaptation. It should be easy for governments to stop drilling for fossil fuels and use renewable energy. But the first thing they say is renewable energy startup is cost. So I think we value money over anything, even happiness.
This is gonna be really quick. The biggest lie that adults tell me, but I've also realized it's also the biggest truth, is that it'll all be okay.
Okay, we're gonna take two more. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was me. We're gonna take two more questions. So yes, pass this to.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jihad Dumami. I'm from the United States. I had a question. So all the presentations, I was kind of wondering, are you including the demographic of youth in the inner city? Because I'm formerly a member of the Black Panther Party. And all the movements of the liberation struggles in the United States back in the 60s and early 70s, the leadership of youth, Huey Newton was in his 20s, Bobby Seale, Kazi Touré, even Al-Haj Malik El-Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They're both assassinated when they're 39, so we start counting back to their activism, 38, 37, 36, that. When they became involved, they were young, and all their efforts was dedicated to the young sisters and brothers in the hood, the lower class, the lumpen class that fomented these movements that brought about serious change that allowed us to be sitting here today. But now, my son is a gangbanger, and I wonder if the message that you're talking about, cleaning the planet and the beaches, have anything to do with Brother Man on 27th Street. How does that message resonate with them? I represent them, and I'd just like to know that.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's really, really important, and we are going to talk about that. You wanted to say it first. I just wanted to say, so I don't consider myself someone who has really lived and experienced what it means to be a youth from the inner city. But I come from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and that's not a major city like some people have around the United States or other parts of the world. But that is an issue that personally, I have lots of friends who have had experiences of things that youth who live in cities are exposed to, whether it's violence or drugs or other issues that tend to be hyper concentrated in those areas. And the experience they have is very unique and very different and often tragic. And it's something that I think we tend to, as much as we like to talk about how we're going to address it, we consistently overlook the needs. We consistently overlook that, and especially going with the point to, you mentioning beaches and the environment, the role that environment plays in that is a lot of youth in cities don't have connection to green space, don't have connection to the environment. So when we talk about a cleaner planet, what does that mean for them when they're surrounded by skyscrapers and sewers and there isn't green space, there isn't, that kind of environment? What does it mean for them to experience that? And not just an environment, what does it mean for them to go to school every day? What does it mean for them to go out onto the street and play games? Is there a space for them to do that? Is there a space for them to be a kid in the way that many of us have talked about what it means to do things and engage with this kind of work? And it needs to be addressed, and that's all I have to say. I don't have a lot of experience on it.
Yeah, it comes back to the role of NGOs also, because oftentimes we have lost hope in government. So when it comes to nonprofits and other groups, I'm a part of a group called Global Shapers. We deal with human rights also. I'm also a child rights ambassador. So oftentimes, as you said, gangbangers and sometimes persons who fall into wrong activities and so on, it doesn't mean that they want to. You must look at person for the potential they have. Many gangbangers could have been lawyers, could have been doctors, could be engineers, could be architects. But do they have the paths? Is there facilities within these communities to allow them to see a life beyond gangbanging? And oftentimes, if somebody they know from that community has been able to create a life that enables them to reach out to organizations that have the funding. I think funding is lacking a lot of times in communities with marginalized groups. And if we have the funding to create the opportunities for youth, and youths like myself are able to reach out to them, if I went to school with them, I'm able to go to them and say, well, I have this opportunity for you to lead this lifestyle, and you can be able to have free education, you're able to have free training, and you can be able to live a life that is rewarding. Because many times we are disconnected from our purpose. And for me, I knew from the moment I started my activism journey, I wanted to be an environmental activist. I understood my purpose. And when you understand your purpose, you find the right activities, the right persons to surround yourself with. And when you do that, you're able to catapult your life in such a direction that you can inspire others. I think youth are lacking inspiration. They're lacking the facilities that enable them to live purposeful lives, and they need role models like themselves who can show them you can be this also. So it is not the case where you have to be a part of the beach cleanup, you have to be a part of the environmental organization, but you have to understand purpose.
And to have a purpose, you have to know where you come from, right? And I think that that's where art and activism really services that type of community, is that everyone is an artist and everyone has a history and everyone has the ability to access that. And when I was working at the museum, my job as a public programmer was to create monthly programs for kids around Atlanta and Metro Atlanta who are not represented in the museum demographic, who have never been encouraged to go to a museum, to really go and create relationships with art and be able to engage that part of themselves. And it also comes from what we value as art and storytelling in a community, right? Tagging is a public art intervention. It's muralism, it's art. And so we have to reframe what we value and who we want to give access to these spaces. And like Monica said, like, this is not an experience that I can speak to. And obviously in inner cities, infiltration and gentrification are a huge issue. So this is not something that I feel I can speak directly to, but it's something that we all have space for.
So while I definitely think that electoral politics play a massive role and are very important to inner city youth, especially at the city or municipal level, if I'm being completely honest, it's not something that they are not a group of people I've been able to engage with in my research. In terms of my personal polling, I went to school in a small town that's predominantly white in rural Pennsylvania. So those were the people I had access to around me to get opinions of. And while I have looked for data regarding young inner city youth in terms of electoral politics, if it's out there, I don't know how to find it.
Storytelling. We need to. I just wanted to make one final point, and that was, my mother, who's a big role model of mine, being a teacher in the public education system for more than 20 years. It's so important that in this space when we think about, from like an academic angle, we think about educators, and a lot of people here are college professors. A lot of people who are college professors are receiving people who already have many privileges. At the very least, the one privilege they have is going to college, right? But the public education system in a lot of countries, not everyone gets to that point. Not everyone is coming from that privilege. And we need public educators to be in our spaces as well, people who are at that level as well, and especially those who are coming from these inner city school settings, because they know their kids, they know the population, they know the communities, and we need to include them as well. That's a part of this, not just including inner city youth and providing resources. And by the way, about resources with communities and inner city communities that tend to be from disadvantaged populations on multiple levels of society, that is also a form of reparations, what are very much needed. Very much needed. We need to make sure that communities have the resources to do things that they need. Because there's also definitely from higher up and from outside organizations sometimes an oversight that overlooks the needs of individual communities, regardless of whether it's an inner city community or a rural community somewhere. And so it's really important that we are empowering communities rather than coming in and enforcing a model that might not work for them, might not serve their needs. And that's one of the things too is, we try to have as much of a diverse panel as possible from different places to get different experiences. because of the fact that there's so much that is localized or regional. And we need to express all the ways that we are combating this issue, these issues. And because we are running out of time, I'm going to take one final question from Noman because he had his hand up earlier, and then we're gonna have to.
Hi, thank you very much. It's not a question, it's a comment. First of all, I would like to thank IPRA for holding this session. Listening to young voices makes me feel hopeful and makes me feel that we are in the right direction. Building upon the insights that all of you have shared, I just want to share my personal experience and the incident that I have come across. While growing up, I grew up as a very confused child. Reason being that my faith told me to love my neighbor, but my textbooks told me to hate my neighbor because of, I don't know if you're aware of the Pakistan-India conflict in history. I was born I was raised with that information, and at that point of time, during those formative years, I didn't know how to process that information, and I grew up with that. Until high school, I was just had this confusion. And at that point, I figured it out myself, and at that point, I had to unlearn those things which I learned previously. My point being is that we talked about education. This is how I grew up. So now when I see the new generation, they are exposed to social media, and there's no mechanism that exists that filters out the information. So they are exposed, and they may not have the access of to some information which they have already. So, and the second concern is that there is no mechanism that exists that checks the facts. So the information available on internet is just there, and we don't know how to figure it out for ourselves even. So these are just the concerns that I wanted to highlight. Thank you very much for this wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We have to finish up because there's another plenary, but we'll be around to ask questions, and thank you again so much for listening and for. Okay. Quickly.
What I would like to end with is, well, my name is Marguerite Agard. I taught in public school in 1982. And I've seen the transition in an inner city school right around this island, from children who came in and really tried to learn, and recently a child being able to walk into school with a cutlass. That is great sadness, but I'm not going to go into that. One of the things we youth speak of is that there needs also to be that intergenerational dialogue. And I'm going to just say what Pope Francis said in 2022. He says, although technological and economic development has tended to create a divide between generations, our current crises show the urgent need for an intergenerational partnership. Young people need the wisdom and experience of the elderly, while those who are older need the support, affection, creativity, and dynamism of the young. Great social challenges and peace processes necessarily call for dialogue between the keepers of memory, elderly, and those who move history forward, the young. Each must be willing to make room for others and not to insist on monopolizing the entire scene by pursuing their own immediate interests, as if there were no past and future. The global crisis we are experiencing makes it clear that encounter and dialogue between generations should be the driving force between a healthy politics that is not content and managed with piecemeal solutions or quick fixes, but views itself as an outstanding form of love for others in the search for sustainable projects in the future. So we need to do.
Thank you so much. And thank you again, everybody. We'll be up here. All right, thank you so much.
were great. If you want to stay on a little, you can, but I know it's really late. So that's up to you. Whether you want, we have to actually, you know what, we have to do it. So we can talk later if you want, okay? Where in DC are you? Oh, I'm bye-bye. I go to GW.
Yeah.
I'm 21. Yes, I live in, but it's like 12:30. I'm tired. Yeah. So we have to
That was like when this was 6 years ago. I'm tired of space.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, we need to understand.
Monica?
Yes.
How old are you?
I'm 20.
This was great to listen to.
I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
It wasn't so much passion.
Yeah.
But I think over our
Yeah.
all five and not one of these four. My career not Yeah.
Hi. Thank you. I think it went okay. Yeah, it went fine. Yeah. Oh, I'm like standing right in front of it. So let me pull your dress.
I don't have questions. I'll let them form.
Thank you. My name is IPRA. So you can shoot.
Have more time to engage with the audience. Yeah, we kind of. Yeah, for sure.
It's only name you.
Hello. I just
Hey, he's pretty good, huh? From your objective. Well, you're this next man.